So we're going to be talking about the future library. And I can think of no more illustrious panel to be doing it with, really. I've never actually heard Bill speak, and my goodness, that was stonking, Bill. And I'm sure you'll have lots more to say, and it's very nice not to have to introduce you, because everybody has now met you. I have two very splendid librarians to introduce. Nick Stopforth, who is head of Doncaster Libraries. That's probably not your proper title, is it? But
no, that is my proper title.
Is it? Oh, wow. Library titles are usually so complicated. Head of Doncaster Libraries. Great. Nick was one of the two librarians who went to talk to the e-lending commission, which, as you know, is shortly going to report. We're not actually going to be talking in detail about e-lending today, but Nick, by all accounts, did a great job. He's one of those senior librarians who is heavily engaged with digital media, introduced e-lending to Newcastle libraries, and then has taken those skills to Doncaster. And then here is Liz McGettigan from award-winning Edinburgh Libraries, who I just think has the most amazing blend of kind of visionary and practical things to say, and has been hopping up and down on her seat next to me. So we'll hear lots more from her. And then finally, Stephen Page, super dynamic CEO of Faber. Really interesting watching Faber respond to the whole new market conditions, and I was really interested when you started to introduce the Faber Academy, and all, just really interesting work. Stephen has also been a great friend to libraries, is a founding partner of Reading Partners, the consortium that the Reading Agency runs, and which is the platform for today's event. So I think we'll start with you, Liz. And the question for all of you is, what's your vision for the future library as an exciting physical and digital space?
Thank you, Miranda. But before I start on that easy question that Miranda's asked me, can I talk a wee bit about the power of social media? And we have a perfect example, Bill and I, to illustrate that. I left my glasses, which makes me pretty blind, on the plane this morning. And Bill?
So I tweeted to British Airways, at British_Airways, saying my friend Liz has left her glasses on flight 8275 from from Glasgow, rather. She's flying back tonight. And about half an hour ago, I got, hello, Bill, a pair of brown specs are with the staff at the ticket desk in London City. We hope these are your colleagues, from British Airways' official global account.
Yay! Yay! To start off, what I have to say, I think the power of social media has, led to a great deal of the success that we've had in Edinburgh Libraries. It's a free media for us, but what it's done for us is open up the world of libraries and what we do, events, books, quality, content to the public. It's made a huge difference to what we do, and we've had a whole suite of social media for over, I think, 4 years now. But one of the most important things that we also did was create an engaging library portal that gave our customers full access to that. So if you like, we are already in a hybrid library situation where we are using digital, we're developing heritage, electronic learning resources. At the same time, we've noticed that people are returning to the libraries for physical visits. They're taking another look. It's not an either or. It's not a books or digital. We are seeing a bit of both. Different audiences. We see children, young families using the libraries. So the hybrid library for us is in existence now. And I think what we're looking for is what is the next step. Yesterday, I noticed in America that they launched their very first bookless library. Did anybody read that? So I thought that was quite intriguing and worth a watch. But what they're also saying is not seen as the only option or way forward. It's just one of the ways they'll deliver the library services. So for us, I think social media surely and the digital world has been a huge opportunity for Edinburgh Libraries. It's not something that we're afraid of. We've grasped the mettle of it, and we're doing a whole lot of really good things. but in return, the improvement in performance has been tremendous. So the hybrid library is where we're at just now, and where we want to go is onward and upward.
Thanks. Do you want to just pass the line leftwards?
As ever, as a publisher, you don't want to be presumptuous about talking about libraries, because librarians know it in such depth and detail, and they are a different place. You know, that's what we discovered when we set up Reading Partners. An industry that was very orientated towards the trade had slightly taken its eye off libraries. But I certainly think that for the publishers I talk to, and the way, I guess, the place I'm coming from with libraries is that there's been such an exciting engagement with really a sort of a non-commercial space around reading within libraries. That's what Reading Partners has been for us. And I suppose that's been a physical thing, that's been an events-based thing, getting our writers into audiences that they would never have come to before, working with librarians who are a very different type of evangelists for reading, you know, very different from booksellers in some ways. But of course, hearing everything Bill had to say earlier on, and thinking about what publishers are actually at the moment, I think there's definitely a new way of thinking about the digital and physical spaces of libraries for publishers. And publishers are, there was a publisher this morning on the digital book conference who said that he expected by the end of 2014 for only 15% of his sales to happen not directly with the consumer, i.e. through book trade and other things. So he was expecting 85% of his relationship with the reader to be done directly. Now, I don't agree that that'll happen, but all publishers are thinking that way. They are all trying to create audience, they're all trying to be directly engaged in a reader who is now out there in all the ways that Bill describes. And I think libraries are an extraordinary sort of, an emporium, an idea, a bigger than a place, if you like, a sort of trusted, extraordinary place where readers can go and discover. And publishers have two huge banks of interesting stuff that we can make available. One is the copyrights we license, and obviously the conversation around e-lending has been to try and find our way towards a sort of settlement that everyone's calm about, where you can e-lend. And the other is, so our copyrights, and the second part of that is the enormous amount of supplementary stuff that we're building. You know, publishers work very closely with writers to create extraordinary experiences around the copyrights, huge amounts. And that's what this, the digital bucket, as we used to call it, I seem to remember. This idea that the video we have of an interview with Orhan Pamuk, because he's in the office, or Jarvis Cocker, or Nicky Wire, whoever comes in, we talk to them, Simon Armitage reads. We create all that information, and it should be available to the community of readers around the library. So there's these two things. How do you make copyrights available in sensational ways, both within the library and remotely? And how do you get that sort of enormous conversation, that one-to-oneness between reader and writer? How do you make that really thrilling? And I think the Library of the Future can do both those things really excitingly.
Great, thanks. Oh, look, you can hold on to that.
We have one. We have one. I think I would just echo and endorse what has been said here already, insofar as we'll be looking for a hybrid in the future. I think we're definitely keen to preserve the library as space, as venue that is so important to us as librarians, as library staff. We know that we can offer so much to communities through our library venues that nobody else can compete with, because of who we are and where we come from, because we're free, because we're accessible, because we're inclusive. It is just the environment made for bringing audiences in and giving them rich reading experiences. So the space and the venue is crucial to me, and I think that will continue to be the case. We will continue to look to invest in our buildings and our resources to make them as good as possible in future. And then it's also about, how does the digital window really reach out to people? And I think it was basically, as Bill was saying earlier, it's not just that it's your kind of, it is your window or your gateway, it's how you're actually connecting to people and bringing them in. And there was a great example earlier with the Twitter reading group. I think, you've got a group of people there who are discussing an author or discussing with an author, and then at the end of the project, the author materializes. It's almost like 3D printing. I mean, it's amazing, So to kind of generate that experience, again, who else can do that? Who can facilitate that in the way that we can? So I think we're at a point in time, it seems to me, it's almost like a tipping point. the digital media and the technology will just continue and continue and won't go away. But we're at a point now where I think we can say we can be fearless about this. It was interesting just hearing the empathy around the problems we still experience in local authorities around access and opening up technology. And my feedback to that, my impression to that was I thought we'd actually moved on. Maybe I've been lucky that where I've worked, we have been able to move on. We need to move on. And there needs to be really high-level discussions if we're not moving on about how we're going to open up all these channels, because we cannot ignore it, and we need to use it, and we need to use it fearlessly. But it's a hybrid model. It's not an either-or, as has been said. It is about how we are engaging with people to make them understand the richness of the reading experience and to get more people reading.
So I'm sitting near to the door. Which is good, because of course the question is, you are open, accessible and available, but also historically grounded in, and that libraries emerged from a particular period of publishing and of growing literacy and of philanthropy and of social engineering. And part of the problem with where we are now is that adapting what libraries were into what they could be is proving incredibly difficult. I'm currently working at the BBC on trying to make the BBC's archive more available to people. And one of the questions that I keep on coming up against is, if we were to invent the BBC today, as in if we were to say today, let's found something, the BBC doesn't exist, what would we make? Because it almost certainly wouldn't be a broadcaster making television programmes. And I wonder if we step back from today's libraries and the attempt to make them hybrids and to adapt and to engage, and actually ask that question, if we were trying to do the things that libraries do today, would we want them to have a physical presence as they do? Would we want them to be charged with the responsibilities they are charged with? Are there different ways of doing things because of the affordances, the capabilities of digital? And to use the answers to that question, not to abolish libraries and put something else in their place, but to guide that evolution. So instead of just saying, how do we take a next step on the journey and a next step on the journey and a next step on the journey and just hope that it's okay, look from a much broader perspective and say, what are the things we want libraries to do? Okay, once we understand that, how do we get from where we are now to here? And there will be casualties. There will be things that we, this generation, us in this room, currently think libraries are vital for, that we decide not to do anymore.
That leads me very neatly onto my next question, really, because I really agree with that. It's also a very difficult juggle, isn't it?
We're not here because it's easy.
Yeah. And Stephen, you said librarians doing something very different from booksellers and from other reading proselytizers. And I wonder if we could just tease out, what are libraries' USPs? What should be the enduring kind of library brand? And, if we were kind of starting where you're talking about, what would you still want to hold on to about what is a librarian, what is a library, and why is it different?
I think if you to pick on one word for libraries, it's the word trust. And that's something that we have over Google. The other thing I would put into the pot here is content. And if you put together the special collections, the unique content, the history and heritage, it would kill off the BBC and Google, if you like, Amazon. If we were big enough, if we thought big enough to put all of that content digitally and do something with it, then that would be something for libraries. So the other thing I'd put into the pot here, libraries are not just about books and reading, we're about information. And I would probably, Bill will argue with me on this one, but we are the gatekeepers to trusted information. So I think we have a role to create a portal to trusted information. And that's one of the things that Edinburgh is trying to do, to become the trusted Google, the Edinburgh Google. We are looking to develop a portal that will bring back the right books on dyslexia, the best accredited web links, the best support groups, the addresses, how to join, where you can see an author, where you can hear Kenny Logan speak about it. So our ambitions are big for Edinburgh, but it's no use us having that ambition in Edinburgh. We need the whole of the UK to be behind us in that. And again, books The format is almost irrelevant. We need to think big. If there was somebody out there from Google, they would be diving in here and saying, give us your special collections. In Edinburgh, we're working with the publishers to develop a publications programme. And again, I would ask you to think about your unique resources and to think big. I'll say one more thing here. Save Our Library is not doing us any favours. It might locally, sorry, I knew somebody wouldn't like that, but it should be invest in our libraries. And we need to show best practice. We don't need to see the press coverage of libraries closing left, right and centre. We need to show the Canada Waters, the Newcastles, the small libraries that are making an impact in people's lives. Sorry, Miranda, for rant.
I like your rants. I thought it was very interesting how some of you in your skill sharing presentations, I was really interested how the media are actually interested in the library of the future, that it is newsworthy that, you know, to the local media that the library is now on Twitter. I think we need to really look at that and think about, you know, how we engage the media differently. Nick?
Yeah, I think that's true. I think the local press often forget about the library service, forget that there's a library service there, and are quite surprised by some of the things that we're doing sometimes. In my mind, the vision of the libraries for the future is about keeping the essence, the core, true to our hearts in terms of reading and the reading offer to people. The vehicle of how we get there with the technology is just the difference, isn't it? It's that we're doing it in a slightly different way and will continue to do so in the future. The other big difference, as has been referred to already, is the mediation, the skill set, and that's why we're here today. Obviously, it's about library staff having those skills to make a difference to communities. That's why, you know, people talk about how libraries were the original Google and all that stuff, but I mean, if there's an element of truth in it, then we need to move on from the fact that people will look at Google and the top page of the Google rankings and think that's the information that's right for me. It's about repositioning libraries so that people understand actually there is something better out there and it's free and it's just as good, well, actually it's better than what Google will do for you.
I agree with what Liz is saying. I mean, there might be far too much agreement on this panel, so you all need to start shouting at us, otherwise we'll just end up in a sort of consensual huddle on the floor and it will be messy. But I do agree with Liz that libraries have a lot to offer that Google doesn't, because Google is always there to serve its interests, not yours. And if it wants to organise the world's information and make it freely available, it wants to sell you adverts on the back of it, and it wants to know what you're doing. And Google, as a corporation, can only be evil, because that's what they're supposed to be under US law. So, you know, it has no choice. It's like Jessica Rabbit, you know, I'm not bad, I was just drawn that way. Given that, there need to be alternatives. And I sort of talked, I brushed up on this in my talk, but didn't really have time to go into it. But a couple of points that have been made, I think, by Nick, make me think that there needs to be a more direct intervention by the librarian community and the publishers in the technologies. That it is not enough just to accept what comes down the line from Facebook and Google and whoever, because none of these technologies is developed in grand isolation. There is this discourse, but at the moment the people who build them are not listening to this community. They're listening to their investor community, they're listening to their young people, whatever, but they're not listening to you. So if Facebook rolls out graph-based search, fantastic, what can you do for you? You have to respond to that. But there's no forum or space for actually a deeper engagement in helping to design and influence the technologies. And there are paths to do this. There are European Union-funded research projects. They're spending billions of euros every year working with the technology industry, working with lots of people. They're difficult things to engage with, and they are long-term thinking. But it becomes possible to imagine how you take your expertise and use it to shape the technologies, which you will then be delivering out in libraries in 5-10 years' time. And that may be something to factor into the thinking.
And of course, actually, Bill, you've touched on the thing that came up endlessly in these three projects we just heard talked about. The thing that for publishers was invisible until the reading agency came along and explained it to us, which is that there is no single place to go and have a conversation with libraries, and that the different bodies, the different places where one can go and influence. The Reading Partners project has accelerated at an extraordinary rate the engagement of publishers with libraries, seeing the value, because the purchasing of books by libraries had plummeted to such a invisible speck that the business, sorry, it sounds a bit dismissive, but it's true. You know, I was a sales director for 10 years and had one meeting about the library services. One in 10 years. And so the commercial imperatives seemed to vanish. The value became invisible. But the value is so deep and intrinsic, and that there's something about that that is now much more visible. But we needed a third party to bring together what the library service was for us to be able to engage singularly. And of course, the big thinking that is happening in these small projects, each one of them has had to overcome very materially similar difficulties around local authority, it seems to me. And that's very frustrating, you know, when I look at it from the outside and say, so if publishing were to partner with the library service to create certain kind of technological solutions or best practice or those things, it's much heavier lifting than my consumer marketing department engaging through social media on our behalf like that. There's no need, and I think I don't know if there's an answer to that, but certainly from where I sit, there is an impediment here which is structural, not to do with expertise, not to do with intent, not to do with the sort of desire to create something new. I just think that some engagement with that debate has to happen.
So can I ask the provocative question, Liz? So when Scotland gets independence, will you reform the library service so that you can manage these things properly?
Well, should I say, I think UK-wide there's need for national libraries development agencies to think big, because we can all think big in our little kingdoms, and me in Edinburgh, and we've got a well-developed relationship with the publishers there. And the success of the events that we have means we have publishers coming to us so that we can launch their books. We film it and put it on YouTube. So there's best practice happening throughout the UK. I do believe we need a development agency, whether that's for Scotland. I'd love to see something like that happen. We need big thinking. I have a dream. I could sing a song here. But the idea of all the beautiful special collections, because in the future I think people will want to buy and own beautiful books, illustrated, maybe bigger coffee table books, something like that. So there's beautiful collections that we have. We are beginning to work with publishers to see if we can develop a publication scheme. One of the other things I can see is public libraries in the future will be places where people go to create their own ebooks, and we will be there to mediate and support them to do that. So another thing I'd love to see is a national publishing portal where libraries can, we weren't getting into ebooks here, we would download our ebooks through subscription model directly. The public can access it as well. We should be able to finance this. Well, probably you could. Public libraries couldn't. But I'd love to see where is all the big thinking? Where is the National Development Agency, the National e-portal ideas? That's what we need to think about. We need to be ahead of the game, not thinking small in our own little corners.
Just to take it one step back there, I was thinking about the point of publishers and leverage in terms of changing all of this, in terms of how we use technology and what we can do in local authorities. And I was talking to Sandy about this just in the break there, about what's the answer to all this. And I felt that if we can demonstrate the power that publishers bring to public libraries, then we've got a lot more force behind us as a result. If we can demonstrate the good practice, the great things taking place, what more powerful argument than the South Tyneside example, I think it was, where we had the girl who says, I don't read, but I'm reading this book, and it's amazing. Now, on a kind of national scale, that kind of leverage will be, I really think we can make big things happen as a result. It also makes me think about Bill's presentation where you're saying, you know, we've got to think about Facebook and Twitter at a higher level. Well, to me, that's thinking, you know, the people who founded Facebook and Apple and all the rest of it, I bet they used libraries when they were young, and I bet they got a hell of a lot from it. Now, what's the comeback here? Because right now, the good libraries are doing stuff with smartphones, for example, ticking the digital inclusion box by helping members of the public learn how to use the Apple products or how to use Facebook. But are Facebook sitting around their board meeting saying, you know, actually there's a large reach there out in libraries and we're going to give them a bit of investment and support with this? I don't really see that happening myself, but it should be. And I think it's that kind of higher reach. That's where we need to be. It's about our positioning. It's about making people at that high level aware of what we're doing and what we can achieve to their end to help them achieve their purpose. But we're doing it all the time without the recognition. And I think that is what needs to change.
These are companies that don't like to pay UK corporate taxes, that are happy to have their bins emptied by councils but minimise their responsibilities in society. So good luck with that. I'll help. Okay.
I think we should have their taxes.
Stephen, do you just want to say a little bit about the piece of work that we're starting to embark on, just very much in outline? You can imagine that at the Reading Agency, we talk about all these things a lot of the time, and also the impossible politics of trying to work across the UK, which is, you know, we have managed, and there are models, and libraries did introduce the People's Network, and surely it should be possible to take the next big step convincingly.
Well, I should probably just also touch on the fact I have been sitting on William Sieghardt's e-lending panel, representing publishing, and one of the reasons why I think that the sort of e-lending conversation became quite sort of tough was because it clearly mirrors certain other things that are going on, other places which are highly commercialized. One of the things it didn't touch on, what e-lending doesn't touch on, is the notion that, you know, when I talk to my writers at Faber, so many of them talk about their experience of escaping home, going to library, you know, engaging with a shelf full of writers they'd never heard of because no one in their home had ever talked about them. And the process of discovery. And it seems to me that there is, and this was what came up in a conversation, that there is within the library a digital offering that could be quite extraordinary, better than anything else literally available, because of that combination of copyright material and created material around the copyright that publishers have a wealth of now, that writers have a wealth of, self-published writers have a wealth of. And I think the vision project is to try and talk about how one could make you know, the library a place to go where you would have the confidence of discovering anything you needed to discover. Now, that includes copyrighted material. As far as I'm concerned, I would be far more excited about building a kind of extraordinary repository within the library space that people can go to and confidently discover. I can't speak on behalf of all publishers, but as a publisher, the Faber is, you know, at the heart of what we are is a cultural and social endeavour. That is what my shareholders want. And it strikes me that the library is the beginning for so many people who write, and also for such a huge portion of those who read our books now, that we can do something now, we can imagine something now that has simply never been possible before, because you don't need a book buying budget in order to make available an extraordinary wealth of material. You can go much further, much deeper into the canon. You can have a far greater you know, relationship between conversations around the work and the work itself, and conversations that are author-built, but then conversations which are, as Bill was describing, everybody else who's reading that book on the planet, in the world. You know, so there are ways of really drawing, you know, that reader and their not loneliness into the text and the writer. And I think libraries have an opportunity to do that.
I'm going to throw it open in a minute to the floor. So I just wonder if you would each like to say what you feel you haven't had a chance to say. I've got to see your lovely notes, Liz. I don't want to cut you off. But, you know, is there anything you want to add to that conversation before we throw it open to you guys?
I'm okay. I've got a keynote to say it all.
I think just I can see that libraries across the country have a unifying power, a unifying ability that we don't tap into enough, I think. The best description I can remember of libraries across the UK, public libraries, was that we are the national reading service. When we think of the British Broadcasting Company Corporation, we are the national reading service. That resonated in my mind for years. I think we're at a point now where, though, we can be the national digital reading service, and that's what I would like to think we could progress to. Reading maintained as the core, still having the physical print available for those people who like to read print and want to read print, but progressing to being the national digital service for people, reading service for people. And it's just how we get there together. Big challenge, but I think with publishers on board, as I said earlier, we'll have a lot of power to harness to get us there.
Imagine do it with BBC as well. Yeah. Liz?
I think I've got 2 points to make, really. The first is, every time I hear about public libraries closing and authorities and Save Our Libraries campaign, I think we are not represented at a high enough level. We ought to be presenting those councils with better options. I mean, why have family centre, a school, a library, several council or education, a health centre, all in a radius, and look at them in a silo mentality and close the library? We ought to be able to say, there's the blueprint for creating one fabulous library as an entrance to that health centre, to that school. So it's how do we get that voice at the right level, and how do we get the confidence to say to those councillors, do it this way, and it's through best practice. The second point is, I think as bookshops close right, left and centre in HMV and the high street disappears, we are very well placed to become that cultural centre in the high street, that access to music, to books, to author events. So I've never been more passionate and confident about the future. Unafraid of the future is Edinburgh. So I'd love us all to get behind that idea, really positive. We've never been better positioned if we can come up with this fabulous vision of where we want to go.
And I suppose I should end by invoking the group of people who we're most concerned with as publishers, which are the writers, because let's remember, all that publishers do is license the copyright. We don't own the copyright. The copyright is the intellectual property of the writer. The writer creates a work, we license it because they think we can create value for them. And I think the big engagement here, so many writers have a sort of commitment both socially, culturally, and in terms of creating audience with libraries. And I think if we can find a way to create a really sort of exciting environment for writers and their readers and their potential readers, the library service can play an increasing part of that in the minds of those who are creating value. There's lots of different ways you create value. You can create money, and you can create a sense of engagement. You can create cultural worth. And I think that there's something about the opportunity sitting in the digital space, the sort of digital to physical space within libraries, that is unlike any other space. And therefore, if we can get some big thinking into that and some simplified processes by which we can deliver it, it seems to me that, that writers will be thrilled by that. The other last thing to say is also there needs to be a buy button somewhere, because what writers need is a living wage. They need to be able to earn money so they can keep writing the extraordinary things we put in front of readers. And if the libraries are to become a part of that, they do need to create some sort of access to purchase if availability is not easy.
Can I just say, this is, when I usually make a presentation, I put a slide up at the end, because libraries will all become places where you buy the book, you can borrow it, or you can read it as an e-book and you can listen to the author. The future of libraries will be exactly as you say. We buy the book, borrow it. We don't really care. Just use the library as that wonderful trusted space.
Great. Questions? Do we have a... Over to you guys. I can't believe you haven't got any questions. Yeah. Can you just say who you are?
Hi, I'm Kate Halliburton and I'm from Wandsworth Cancer Libraries. I just got a question about the staff, and it's all great to hear all those visions of future the libraries are digital and hybrid spaces which we can all use, etc. But it's very hard to actually organize something if we do not have people who are interested in it, passionate about it. So the question to you will be, how do you make sure that your staff is engaged in those same sort of ways as you are?
I think, yeah, it's that you're right. It is an issue, and I think early days in Edinburgh, we did have some time with very traditional staff that thought their job was simply just to issue the book. But it's about getting people involved. It's about the training. It's about them seeing the potential to get more for their customers from the offer. So yeah, there's a two-pronged approach. It's about training, but it's also about people buying in to the vision. And it's also about having visions to be the best. One time, at the beginning of our service, we decided our vision would be to be the best, and we went for it. And we passed that vision down to all of the staff to say, you are the best at what you do. So, yeah, it's a hard one, but it's what we need to do with the staff.
And I think it needs to start at an early stage as well when we think about recruiting staff into services as well. So my question would be how many, and I raised this earlier, how many library job descriptions have built into them can embrace technology or is comfortable with social media? For example, it's just a question, but I suspect not many. I would emphasize again, yeah, definitely around investment, training, support, the vision. Why are we doing this? The presentation's picked up on that at the beginning. Why do we want to do this? What are we trying to achieve from it? And it's selling that vision to the staff so that everybody understands that we can get something better out of our service as a result that's better for our public. But that's a big commitment and a big investment. Personally, I think it's one that I would like to see all the library staff in my service pick up with, but I put my hands up, we're not there. You know, it's a long road. But you have to start with that investment, recruitment, and getting the attitude and the perspectives right.
I think you can also look and see what's happened in other areas. So I was at the Guardian newspaper in the early 90s when journalists were just starting to realise that digital technology might have some impact on their lives. And it was astonishing just to see the resistance. What interested me at the time was the young kids who were coming into newspapers were fine about it. And I found the older journalists were also quite keen because they were willing to embrace change and give it a go, whatever. And it was those in the middle of their careers who were really worried because they had an idea about their future and you were taking it away from them. And they saw an easy path into seniority and retirement. And you were saying, well, actually, no, you're going to have to learn new stuff. And they didn't like to do that. So it was an unexpected group of people who were resisting. I think training is going to be important as well. The Welsh Government has just put some money into a digital project called Hub, HWB, which is a virtual learning environment for every Welsh school. And it's going to give teachers access to a whole load of online resources and materials. And as part of that investment, they're rewriting the teacher training curricula. So they're saying, we know we have to put a lot of money into staff development at this early stage to ensure that the teachers can take advantage of the other things we're offering them. And so you need that integrated approach. You can't, again, it is almost about, where is a place where you can have that influence that's not just about every individual library or any individual manager or any individual member of staff, but it's an overarching framework within which these digital possibilities are built into the idea of what the library is becoming. And so people know what they're getting into, and those who are struggling know they will be given the support, the training, and the help they need to make that transition.
And just to say one quick thing, which is publishing, is in a state of incredibly fast transformation. So the skills agenda is one of the big agendas within it, because there's 200 English literature graduates apply for every assistant position in the production department of Faber. And it's not really the English literature degree we're interested in anymore. But there's definitely a huge skills transformation going on in publishing, as went on in newspapers, as is going on in film and in television. And yes, in a commercial business, we probably have a quicker recourse. We can say, these are the non-negotiables, this is how you've got to be in your job, and we can move on a little swifter. But it is true to say that 3 or 4 years ago, publishing didn't look terrifically smart about any of this stuff. And in 3 to 4 years of cultural immersion, you know, every layer of the company. I don't see this sort of mid-40s generation who are resisting Bill within publishing, and he said retirement. Oh. And but you know, but we've had those other media industries go over the waterfall before us. We've seen there's no point in resisting. We've got to transform ourselves, and I suspect that you know, I've heard such wonderful, inspiring things today from people at all sorts of points in their career, you know, their library careers in all sorts of parts of the country, and I think it's the belief that you can transform. It is not so impossible, but you need a bit of new, and you need, you know, courage to change, and imperative. We had a commercial imperative.
One of the most cheering things that's happened to me probably in the last 6 months was we've just done an event with a lot of the Summer Reading Challenge volunteers, and we took some of them to number 11 and showcased what they'd been doing, a lot of which was using social media. And you know, there are now 4,500 young people volunteering to support the Summer Reading Challenge. Some of those are beginning to get jobs in libraries. So for me, there's a thing about partnering with the public to create the library service of the future as well, and that the kind of digital stuff will come through that partnership as well. So it's not just all about what are we going to do in our silo, it's how are we going to work with the public really differently. We've got time for one more question.
You were talking earlier about this business of the library having being the trusted source of information, and the great battle we have between people just Googling something, getting something off Wikipedia, and we know that the stuff that we can give access to is brilliant. But in order for any of our customers to get access to that, firstly, they've got to be a member of the library. Secondly, they've got to go to the library's website. Then they've got to take their library card and their PIN in, and then they get to the resource. It's a hell of a lot quicker to go to Google. And one of the things we found, we have a Facebook page in East Sussex. We sometimes think, wouldn't it be great if we could put a link directly to a resource on, say, one of the Oxford publications that relates to something that's going on now, but we can't link directly to it. We put a link in our Facebook page, but of course then you go to the website and then you've got to log in. How do we get over that barrier?
I knew that one would come to me. So what you're saying is access to online resources is far from perfect, I think. and I think that's been the case for some time. I think it's something that the providers are aware of because I've talked to them about it before. Wouldn't it be great if we could have unified federated searching, for example? Wouldn't it be wonderful if you could have direct access without your library membership login? But they have their own paywalls because they themselves are companies that need to make money and they restrict access accordingly. It is like hitting your head against a brick wall sometimes, but you have to understand where they're coming from as well. Plus, sometimes the technology isn't quite there in terms of how they can use it as well. So I think it's a hard one. It's a really hard one to answer, is all I can say. What I would say is that in terms of e-lending, having seen that and learnt from it, we know we would want something better. That's not answering the question, I'm sorry.
In the longer term, support the proposals that are currently coming through from the European Commission about digital identity on a Europe-wide basis. Because if you have roles-based authentication, then you can know for sure that somebody is a member of your library. Then there is a chance that the copyright holder will allow people who can be fully authenticated indirectly. Without that, you'll never get anywhere.
Well, that's that then.
I suppose I'll go back to what I'm not very clear what it would look like, but some sort of national portal that we would all have bought in the right paid on a national basis for these subscriptions, and the same portal would let us access e-books, etc., and a build-up of our fabulous collections. So I don't know quite how we'd make it happen, but it seems to me that would be quite a simple, dare I say it, route to answer some of these questions. Nationally negotiated subscriptions and license for e-books, etc.
The only thing to say, I would say, is that one of the things that's come out of thinking about e-books quite hard and e-lending is that there's no one commercial solution. I mean, in fact, what we should encourage is a plethora of commercial solutions that have some they have some range in them, because there are certain things you are going to want to get the copyright. What Bill's describing, you are going to want a sort of direct, getting out of the way, if you like, of what the user wants to do with, to get access to certain information. A lot of that information will cost money. Either the library will pay or the user will pay, one or the other. But there are lots of different models, and I think, mentioning subscriptions, and I think we're at the absolute foothills of people trying to understand the manner in which we can grant people access to copyrighted material in a granular way, in a more global way, and we should just keep our minds open. What there has to be is an engaged commercial and social conversation. That remains at the heart of things, and copyright is there for very, very good reasons, but it is not a fixed thing. Copyright is an adapting thing. It is always adapting to circumstances, and but it's really, deeply important. It's not those businesses so much. Go back to those writers. The writers have to have that. So we've got to work together to try and come up with these solutions, but they'll be various, I reckon.